you guys have been the subjects of a lot of business case studies, and a lot of people kind of come to you to kind of find out what your ingredients for success are. And one of the sort of formulations I've read was that, Bob, you always want to start with four things, the kind of most important one being the huge idea, the thing that is preferably a platform that's going to give rise to lots of other sort of subsidiary technologies that will actually help people. And I wanted to ask you whether your sense of what the huge ideas are today, is it any different from when you were starting out? And how has your definition of a huge idea changed, and what is it today, perhaps in contrast to earlier in your career?
Well, I think you're always trying to think as a scientist what things that you can do that'll, change science in a fundamental way. And certainly there are things that exist today that didn't exist in the 80s. I mean, so certainly one example that's been a huge idea is siRNA, and that's I've been on the advisory board of Alnylam since the beginning, and I think that's one example. There's certainly others. I think certainly stem cell biology is a huge idea. Whether it'll become a huge set of companies, a lot will be tricky to figure out exactly how best to do it. I mean, fate's an example that was talked about earlier, but I think that so I think there's a number of huge ideas that are around today that that weren't, say, around 20 years ago. Then there's other ideas like nanotechnology is a big idea. We're doing a lot in that. Probably was around 20 years ago, but nobody seemed to care about it, and now a lot of people seem to. And some of the new ideas are things that don't exist now. I mean, you're always trying to think of, as a scientist, what kinds of things we can do that will, change science or, create new materials, things like that. And so we're always doing that. Other people are too. And, so some of those, so I think it'll keep changing just like science keeps changing.
I wonder whether there are times when you've come up with or come across, or your students have come to you with huge ideas that you took a look at them and you said, yeah, that could help a lot of people, but I just can't see a mechanism for finding funding for it, or it doesn't seem commercializable. And what do you do in those cases? Do you send them off in search of another huge idea, or do you kind of cogitate until you come up with a commercialization scheme?
Yeah, well, commercialization scheme is not important to me as a professor. I mean, if that happens to me, that's great, but if I feel something, so there's many levels to your question. To me, the most important thing that I view as a professor is doing good science and training good scientists. But by very nature of what we've done, a lot of times these things are commercializable, and a lot of times the things we do, you don't want to just stop at a paper. You want to really get it to the point where it can help people. So I wouldn't tell somebody to stop if it wasn't commercializable. But I do think that trying to be able to raise money, sometimes it's not venture money. Sometimes there's areas that we work on or that I have ideas on that are almost impossible to find funding for just because of the nature of the government. I mean, just to give you an example, people will think I'm crazy when I go over this one, but that's not like it was many years ago when I did a lot of the medical things. But like I, for example, have had ideas on hurricane research, how you could mitigate hurricanes. Absolutely impossible. It's amazing. The government loses, I mean, I don't know, take Ike or Katrina or whatever, I don't know how many billions of dollars on this. There's probably not 10 cents that goes into hurricane mitigation research, even after those. We've been trying to do it. I've been bootlegging some stuff on it for 8 years. I'm not going to stop, but it's murder to try to find funding for it. And it's probably not commercializable either, but it's important, so, we're going to try.
Actually, I want to turn your question slightly, because there have been, as Bob points out, Bob is, he's a professor at MIT. He's got a lot of opportunities and desires. But so every once in a while, Bob will be giving a presentation, and I'll be in the audience or on a panel with Bob to listen to the presentation, and the science will be presented, and I will then pull him aside and say, "Hey, Bob, is this a startup?" And on more than one occasion, he said no. It really isn't. It's great science. It's an important problem set. But the truth of the matter is it's probably not within the sort of the 10 to 12 year time frame that we have to commercialize it. So I actually, again, one of the reasons why his partnership is, because a lot of other professors would say, sure, funding for my idea, great, I'll take that. Of course it's commercializable, only to find out it's not. So I think it really speaks to Bob again, which is this partnership, which is he certainly doesn't tell students not to pursue the great idea, but if it's not commercializable in his assessment, he sits back and says, great idea, let's let it run, but let's not think about investing in it now.
Mm-hmm. So that's what other criteria do you use then when you just mentioned one? Does it have that sort of 10 to 12 year manageable kind of time horizon to be something that would have commercial appeal in the marketplace? If it didn't have that, what other things are there that might prevent great ideas from attracting resources?
Well, let me talk about what has worked and by therefore the exception out, which is if you look at I think it's really true. If you look at every company that we've invested in, particularly with Bob, on the life science side, it's had both a platform technology as well as a product strategy, and it has the ability to be a little bit of both. And I think that's important because the platform is enormously important for protecting and expanding an idea, and particularly for a partner or an acquirer to come along and say, God, I like that product, but I love the technology. And so I think that's an important part. At the same time, oftentimes the financial markets are such that they fall in love with product stories versus platform stories and vice versa. And so I think, and also it's important to have a product to actually demonstrate that the platform is worth something. So I think those are the models that we pursue, and therefore by definition, we tend to be a little less enthusiastic about a pure platform play. We tend to be a little less enthusiastic about a pure product play. There are some of those in our portfolio, but we tend to prefer this sort of combination play. And the trick there, of course, is that if you have to fund all that work. And so in that sense, one has to look at the capital efficiency and whether you're signing up for a $30 or $40 million a year spend, which by definition would make it a difficult time to get a good return, not just for the venture capitalists, but also for the founders.
Mm-hmm.